The children's oncology ward sat in a fragile kind of quiet just before dusk, the kind that felt like it could shatter at any second. Machines beeped in slow, measured rhythms, each sound marking time that a little girl did not have to spare. The air smelled of antiseptic and something heavier, fear that no amount of cleaning could erase. Outside the tall windows, winter clouds pressed low over the city, dark and suffocating. Inside, a trembling mother held her sick child close, whispering promises she was not sure she could keep, while nurses spoke urgently into radios, their voices tight with restraint and rising panic. This was not just about illness. It was about seconds slipping away while adults realized help would not come fast enough. The danger was immediate and human. A violent father, convinced medicine was a lie, was coming back to take his child by force, no matter who stood in the way. Security had already failed once. The police were too far out, time was bleeding away. Then, just as hope thinned to almost nothing, the building began to tremble, not from fear, but from the distant thunder of engines. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. If you like stories where loyalty and courage still mean something, hit subscribe. Ridge Iron Vow. Calder carried a presence that could still a room without a single word. He was the president of the Iron Serpents Motorcycle Club, a man shaped by decades of asphalt, violence narrowly avoided, and promises never broken. His face was cut with old scars that told stories he never explained, his iron-gray beard framing a jaw that had learned patience the hard way. His eyes were the kind that noticed exits, hands, breathing patterns, eyes that missed nothing. Across the state, his reputation was not built on chaos or cruelty, but on discipline. Ridge believed in restraint as much as force, and in a code that did not bend once given. When he gave his word, people treated it like law because they had seen what happened when it was tested. At his side was Mace, the road captain, lean and sharp-eyed, always thinking 3 moves ahead. Mace didn't raise his voice and didn't posture. He studied spaces the way soldiers studied terrain, mapping hallways, entrances, and blind corners like a battlefield long before trouble arrived. Gravel followed close behind them, a massive man with shoulders like poured concrete. Gravel rarely spoke. He didn't need to. His sheer size and stillness ended arguments before they began, reminding anyone watching that violence was possible, but not desired. Nix, Ridge's old lady, moved through the group with quiet authority. She was calm, organized, and deeply observant, the kind of woman who noticed exhaustion before it turned into mistakes. She coordinated shifts, brought food, and spoke gently with nurses and families, becoming the invisible backbone that held everything together. Around them were the Iron Serpents themselves and allied chapters who answered Ridge's call without hesitation. Riders rotated in and out, forming a living wall of leather and chrome, bound not by recklessness, but by loyalty and shared understanding. At the heart of it all was Lily Ray. She was small, pale, and fighting leukemia with a strength that felt unfair for someone her age. Tubes and machines surrounded her, each one vital, each one fragile. Her survival depended on uninterrupted treatment. No delays, no stress, no sudden removals. She did not fully understand the danger around her, only that her mother's hand sometimes shook when she thought Lily wasn't looking. Hannah Ray had lived in survival mode for years. She was exhausted, in a way sleep could not fix, brave, in a way that came from necessity rather than choice. She had escaped once, built a fragile sense of safety for her child, and now felt it slipping away. Every sound in the hallway made her tense. Every raised voice sent her heart racing. She knew exactly what kind of man Lily's father was, because she had loved him once and paid for it. Cole Ray was volatile, paranoid, and deeply convinced that the world was lying to him. He rejected doctors, science, and authority, replacing them with his own twisted certainty. In his mind, he was the only one who truly loved his daughter, the only one willing to save her. Control and love were the same thing to him. Anyone who stood between him and Lily became an enemy, and he carried that belief like a weapon. The setting itself felt torn in half. The children's hospital had always been a sanctuary, a place of quiet voices, careful movements, and fragile hope. Fluorescent lights reflected off polished floors. Hallways echoed with soft footsteps and whispered prayers, but outside, Everything had changed. Engines rumbled low and steady. Leather-clad sentinels stood watch in winter air, their presence stark against the sterile walls. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Innocence and grit sharing the same ground. Brotherhood revealed itself not through speeches, but through action. Bikers stood silent ships through the night. They shared coffee with nurses whose hands shook from exhaustion. They offered protection without asking for thanks or recognition. No demands. No intimidation. Just presence. In that space, fear slowly gave way to something unexpected: trust. Cole Ray hit the children's oncology floor like a storm that had been waiting for the right door to kick open. One moment, the ward had been tense but functioning. Nurses moving with trained calm, monitors keeping their steady rhythm, parents speaking in whispers because the walls felt thin and sacred. The next, the elevator door slid apart, and Cole exploded out of them with wild eyes and a voice loud enough to make a sleeping toddler jolt awake in the next room. He didn't walk. He charged. His boots struck the polished floor hard, too heavy, too fast, like he wanted the building itself to feel him coming. He was already shouting before anyone could stop him, words tumbling out in a fevered rage. "Poison! Lies! You're killing her!" He pointed at nurses like they were criminals, pointed at the equipment like it was a weapon. When a staff member stepped into his path with trembling hands raised, Cole shoved past with a snarl, shoulders squared, jaw clenched like he'd come to win something he'd already decided was his. Hannah heard him before she saw him. The sound of his voice traveled down the hallway and into her bones, dragging old memories behind it, nights when the walls shook with anger, mornings when apologies came too late, the slow realization that love could turn into a cage without warning. Her stomach dropped so hard she thought she might be sick. She looked down at Lily, pale against the sheets, a small hand curled around the edge of a blanket like it was the only solid thing in the world. Lily's eyes were half open, unfocused, but she sensed the change in the air. Children always did. They felt fear the way other people felt weather. A nurse tried to intercept Cole near the doorway. Cole didn't slow down. He slapped the nurse's hand away like it was nothing and lunged for the equipment beside Lily's bed. His fingers found the tubing and yanked, not fully understanding what he was grabbing, only knowing he wanted to tear apart anything that represented the hospital's control. The machines responded instantly, alarms snapping to life, sharp and panicked. The sound cut through the ward, pulling attention from every room, every parent, every staff member. "Stop." Dr. Klein, calm, experienced, exhausted, stepped in with that practiced authority doctors used when they had to be both healer and shield. "You're going to hurt her." Cole spun toward the doctor, face flushed and trembling with conviction. "You already are," he barked. "You're filling her with poison and calling it medicine. You think I don't know? You think I haven't seen what they're saying?" "They," Dr. Klein repeated, careful with every word, like stepping around a live wire. "Cole, you need to leave. There's a court order." Cole laughed, harsh and broken. "Court order?" He took a step forward, towering, fists clenched. "You think paper stops me from saving my daughter?" Security arrived late and small. Two men who looked like they belonged at a shopping mall, not in a hallway where a man was ripping at a child's lifeline. One of them raised a hand, voice shaky but trying. "Sir, we need you to come with us." Cole shoved him so hard the guard stumbled back into the wall. The second guard reached for his radio, but Cole's glare froze him mid-motion. For a second, the guard hesitated, and that hesitation was all Cole needed. He surged toward the bed again, hands already reaching, already tearing. Hannah moved without thinking. She stepped between Cole and Lily, arms spread, body shaking, throat tight with terror. "No," she said, and it came out thin, like her voice didn't believe it could stop him. "Cole, no please." Cole's eyes flicked to her, and something ugly shifted behind them. For a heartbeat, Hannah saw not a father frantic with fear, but a man who couldn't stand being denied. His face twisted. "Move," he growled. "She needs this," Hannah pleaded, trying to keep her voice steady. "She needs treatment." "If you take her?" "If I take her, I save her," Cole snapped, and his hand shot out, grabbing Hannah's wrist hard enough to make her gasp. He tried to pull her aside like she was furniture. Nurses rushed in, forming a shaky line. They were brave, but bravery didn't make them stronger. They were outmatched in weight, in aggression, in sheer unpredictable violence. Cole's presence contaminated the whole ward, the way his rage filled the space, the way his shouting made children cry, the way parents held their kids tighter and looked around as if there was nowhere safe left. Somewhere down the hall, another alarm went off. A child began sobbing. A mother called for help in a voice that sounded like it might break. Hannah felt the world narrowing, the way it always did when Cole was like this. The system that was supposed to protect her orders, policies, guards, polite procedure, was moving too slowly for the danger standing inches from her child. A restraining order meant nothing when someone decided consequences were worth it. The police would come, but they would come later. Later was a word that could kill Lily. Cole's fingers brushed the tubing again, and the monitor tone shifted. Warning, urgent, doctored. Klein lunged forward, trying to keep his hands away from the line, but Cole turned with a snarl, knocking the doctor back into a cart. Metal clattered loudly, echoing like a gunshot in the sterile hallway. That was the moment everything changed. Not when Cole arrived, not when he screamed, not even when security failed. It changed when Hannah realized, fully, clearly, that if she didn't bring something stronger into this hallway right now, Lily would not survive the night. She reached into her pocket with shaking hands and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over a number she hadn't touched in years, a number she'd sworn off like an addiction. She could almost hear her own past self saying she would never call them again, that she would never drag that life back into her child's world, that she would stay clean of it and safe. But safety was already gone. Cole had brought the danger with him. Hannah stepped into a side hall, still close enough to see Lily's door, still close enough to hear the alarms and the shouting. Her fingers trembled so badly she had to press the call button twice. When it finally rang, her chest tightened like she was stepping off a cliff. Ridge, Iron Vow, Calder answered on the second ring. His voice was low, steady, and sharp with alertness, like he never truly slept. Hannah. She hadn't heard his voice in so long that it hit her like a punch. She swallowed hard. Ridge, she whispered, and the word came out cracked. She tried to say more, tried to explain, but fear crowded her throat. Ridge didn't ask questions first. He listened. He listened the way men like him listen past the words, into the tremble, into the silence between breaths. In that silence, he heard what mattered. Hannah forced it out. He's here, she said. Cole, he's trying to take her. He's ripping things out. They can't stop him. Her eyes burned. If he takes her, she dies. On the other end, there was a pause, not confusion, not doubt, but calculation. Hannah could almost picture Ridge where he was, still as stone, eyes narrowing, already seeing the shape of the problem. You're at the children's hospital, he said. It wasn't a question. He remembered the details because Ridge remembered everything that mattered. Yes, Hannah choked. Ridge, I didn't have anyone else. Ridge's voice softened by a single degree, like a blade lowering but not leaving the hand. You did the right thing calling. In the background, Hannah heard movement boots, a chair scraping, the shift of a man rising with purpose. Ridge didn't waste time comforting with pretty words. That wasn't his way. He said, stay with her. Do not leave that room unless you have to. Ridge, Hannah started, but Ridge cut her off gently. I'm coming, he said. You hear me? I'm coming. The line went dead. Hannah stared at her phone for a second, heart hammering. Inside Lily's room, Cole shouted again, and something crashed. The alarms kept screaming like the ward itself was begging the world to move faster. Somewhere across the city, Ridge Calder was already patching in every chapter within writing distance. Men and women who lived by a code outsiders didn't understand. Riders who didn't ask for explanations when the cause was clear. And when the last call connected, Ridge said only one line, simple, heavy, final, a child needs guarding. From that moment on, walking away was no longer possible. The first engines arrived like distant thunder rolling in from the edge of the city, low and steady, not frantic, not reckless, controlled. It started with a handful of headlights cutting through the winter dusk, gliding into the hospital's front drive like a procession that had been rehearsed 100 times. Then another set, and another. Bikes in waves, chrome and black steel and road grime, each rider moving with the calm precision of people who understood that panic was contagious. They did not rush the doors. That was what unsettled everyone watching. Security guards braced as if they expected a brawl. A few visitors pulled out phones, already hungry for a headline. Nurses gathered behind glass, faces pale, lips pressed tight. The hospital's front desk clerk froze with the receiver still in her hand, eyes darting between the entrance and the growing line of motorcycles outside. But the riders didn't swarm. They parked in clean rows. They dismounted without shouting, without laughter, without swagger. Leather creaked, boots hit concrete. Breath drifted in white clouds beneath the lights. A road captain stepped forward, mace eyes sharp, hands relaxed, posture alert. He spoke in short, quiet instructions, and the club moved like a single organism responding to a pulse. Two riders took the main entrance, not blocking it, just standing to either side like pillars. Another pair walked the perimeter, checking the side doors and service bays. A cluster drifted toward the ambulance bay, not interfering, just watching, making sure no one slipped in through a place the hospital forgot to protect. Within minutes, without a single threat spoken aloud, exits and corridors were covered. Upstairs, the ward still smelled like antiseptic and fear, but a new tension threaded through it now, a question that wouldn't stop echoing in everyone's mind. What happens when they come inside? Hospital administration panicked the way administration always did when something couldn't be filed neatly into policy. The on-call administrator, face flushed, tie slightly crooked, marched down toward the lobby with a lawyer's fear in his eyes, flanked by two security guards who suddenly looked even smaller. "This is unacceptable," he hissed to the head of security. "We cannot have a motorcycle gang. Club," one of the nurses corrected under her breath, almost without thinking, then instantly regretted speaking. The administrator stopped short at the glass doors when he saw them. Dozens already, more arriving. Not loud, not disorderly, worse, in his mind, organized. The kind of organized that meant they belonged there like they'd decided they did. He pushed through the automatic doors with his hands up, trying to look authoritative. "Who's in charge here?" Ridge iron vow. Calder stepped forward from the line like he'd been waiting for that exact question. He didn't announce himself. He didn't smile. He simply existed in a way that made the administrator's voice falter slightly. Ridge's scarred face stayed calm. His iron-gray beard moved only when he spoke. "I am." The administrator swallowed. "You need to leave. This is a hospital." "There are children here." Ridge's eyes didn't blink. "That's why we're here." The administrator opened his mouth, then closed it again, like his rehearsed argument had just been stolen. "We have security," he tried. Ridge glanced at the guards behind him, and something in that look wasn't cruel, just honest. "No, you don't." The words landed like a stone. A siren wailed in the distance. Somewhere, a baby cried. The world kept turning, indifferent. Ridge stayed still. The administrator looked like a man realizing the world had rules that didn't belong to him. Upstairs, nurses braced for chaos that never came. They expected yelling, intimidation, maybe drunken laughter echoing through the halls. Instead, they saw men and women in leather and patches, standing quietly in the lobby, hands at their sides, faces serious, eyes scanning, not hunting for trouble, waiting for it. The calmness threw the staff off balance more than any threat could have. A veteran nurse stepped to the window and watched as one of the bikers held the door for a frail elderly woman exiting with a walker. Another biker moved a bike slightly to clear space for an arriving ambulance without needing to be told. A woman in a club handed a cup of coffee to a security guard whose hands were shaking. The ward didn't relax, not yet. But it stopped drowning. Children began to notice. They always did. A little boy with a shaved head pressed his hands to the glass and stared down at the bikes like they were something from another universe. Two teenage patients, thin and pale, watched from the hallway and whispered, equal parts frightened and fascinated. Even the parents, exhausted, suspicious, desperate, couldn't look away. Lily watched too from her bed, half propped on pillows. Her face was too pale for a child, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. The machines beside her kept their steady song, but the edge of panic had softened. Hannah sat close, holding Lily's hand, her body still tense but no longer shaking uncontrollably. For the first time, in what felt like forever, she wasn't listening for Cole's footsteps every second. She wasn't calculating escape routes in her head. She was listening to something else. Engines outside, idling low. Boots shifting as riders changed positions. Quiet radios. A rhythm of protection. Ridge set shifts like a man running a perimeter on hostile ground. Riders rotated, not because they were tired, though they were, but because fatigue led to mistakes. Nix moved through the lobby and the waiting areas, checking on the ones who were watching, the ones who were scared, the ones who needed reassurance without being promised something nobody could guarantee. Hannah didn't mean to fall asleep. She fought it at first, fear still clawing. But exhaustion won the way it always did, slowly and then all at once. Her head dipped toward Lily's blanket. Her fingers loosened around Lily's hand. She slept. Only for minutes at first, then longer. Each time she woke, her first instinct was terror, until she remembered. The wall was still there, the riders were still there. And for the first time in days, the air didn't feel like it was waiting to be ripped apart. That peace was fragile. Ridge knew it. Mace knew it. Gravel knew it. They didn't confuse quiet with safety. They knew men like Cole Ray didn't disappear just because a door was closed. When Cole returned, it was late enough that the hospital corridors were quieter, but not quiet enough to hide rage. He came in like a fuse already lit, storming toward the entrance with a hood up and his shoulders tight. He expected the same thing he'd seen before: weak security, scared staff. Hannah cornered and powerless. Instead, he found the iron serpents. He stopped in the cold just outside the entrance, staring at the line of bikers like they were a hallucination. His face twisted. "What the hell is this?" he snarled, loud enough for the lobby to hear. No one answered right away. That silence was deliberate. It forced Cole to hear his own voice, to feel how small his rage sounded against a wall that didn't flinch. Ridge stepped forward, slow, controlled. "You don't belong here," he said. Cole's eyes darted, counting bodies, counting patches, recognizing danger. His pride refused to back down, but his instincts screamed. "That's my kid," he spat. "You can't keep me from my kid." Ridge didn't raise his voice. "Your child is receiving treatment." "You interrupted it once. You will not do it again." Cole laughed, sharp and ugly. "Who the hell are you supposed to be? Some kind of hero?" Ridge's eyes narrowed. "No." Cole took a step forward, testing the distance. Riders shifted slightly, just enough to show readiness without escalation. Gravel's shadow loomed behind Ridge like a warning carved into stone. Cole's voice rose. "This is kidnapping. This is a hospital," Ridge cut in, calm as winter steel. "And those are children." Cole's jaw worked, anger churning, his hands clenched and unclenched. He wanted a fight. He wanted chaos. He wanted someone to swing first so he could claim victimhood. Ridge gave him nothing. Then Ridge delivered the rule that defined everything from that moment forward: quiet, absolute, unbreakable. No violence, he said, not just to Cole, but to his own. Protection only. Mace's gaze flicked across the line. Riders nodded once, each one accepting the order like a vow. Cole looked from face to face, realizing there would be no easy crack to exploit, no guard to shove aside, no nurse to terrorize, no hallway to charge. He backed up a step, still snarling, still trying to hold on to control through noise. "This isn't over," he promised, voice trembling with rage and desperation. Ridge didn't move. "I know," and that was the truth that tightened the air. The standoff grew public. People posted videos. Rumors spread like wildfire: gangs at a children's hospital, bikers taking over, violence about to erupt. Reporters called. Police cruisers started circling. The hospital tried to manage optics, while Ridge managed reality. Inside, nurses kept working. Children kept fighting for life. And outside, the line held. Every hour that passed felt heavier, like a rope being pulled tighter and tighter, tension coiling toward something that had not shown its final shape yet. Cole Ray did not come back alone the next time. He came the way men like him always came when their pride had been bruised and their control had been denied, bringing bodies, bringing noise, bringing the kind of backup that was meant to make other people blink first. The night air was sharper, colder, carrying the promise of snow that hadn't started falling yet but already felt inevitable. Headlights swept across the hospital drive in jagged beams as a line of trucks and beat-up sedans rolled in behind Cole. Doors slammed. Boots hit pavement. A handful of men gathered around him, shoulders squared, hands buried in pockets like they were trying to look casual while their eyes hunted for fear. They weren't there to talk. They were there to intimidate. Cole stepped forward, chin lifted, voice loud enough to reach the entrance. "I brought witnesses," he called. "I brought people who know what you are." His allies snickered, fed by his confidence, but their laughter thinned when they saw the iron serpents and the allied chapters still in place, more now than before. The line hadn't shrunk. It had thickened. Riders stood in disciplined clusters at every entrance point, not crowding families, not blocking emergency access, but making it unmistakably clear that any attempt to force their way inside would meet a wall that did not break. Mace moved like a shadow along the perimeter, checking angles, counting steps, confirming positions. Gravel stood near the main doors with his hands clasped in front of him, expression unreadable. Nix watched from inside the lobby, not panicked, not rattled, measuring the mood like a medic measuring blood loss. Cole's men saw the patches and reacted the way men always did when they realized they'd walked into something bigger than their own courage. Some puffed up, trying to compensate. Others kept their eyes down, suddenly remembering they had jobs, families, consequences. Cole refused to acknowledge any of that. He couldn't. To acknowledge it would mean admitting he was losing. He shouted, "That's my daughter! You can't keep me out like some criminal!" Ridge stepped forward, slow, calm, and cold. His boots made no sound, but his presence landed heavy. "You're not being kept out," Ridge said. "You're being stopped." Cole's face flushed. "By what? A gang? You think you're above the law?" That was the moment the law arrived. 2 cruisers, then another, lights washing blue across chrome and leather, and the hospital's pale stone. Officers stepped out carefully, hands near their belts, eyes flicking between Cole's group and the bikers like they were trying to decide who would explode first. A sergeant approached Ridge, posture stiff. "We're getting calls," he said, voice low but firm. "A lot of calls. Hospital administration wants this cleared. Media is circling. You need to disperse." Ridge didn't move. "We're not blocking access," he said. "Ambulances are clear. Families are clear." "That's not the point," the sergeant snapped, glancing toward the phones being held up by gawkers across the street. "This is a liability. You know how this looks." Ridge's eyes held steady. "Looks don't save children." The sergeant's jaw tightened. "You're playing with fire. If something happens, everyone here gets dragged in." Mace stepped closer, not threatening, just present. "We're preventing something," he said quietly. "Not causing it." The officer looked like he wanted to argue, but his gaze slid toward Cole, who was pacing like a rabid animal, still shouting, still trying to push his men forward with pure force of will. The sergeant had been called here for the bikers, but the real volatility was standing right there in a hoodie with a rage problem and nothing to lose. "You need to understand," the sergeant said, lowering his voice further. "If he claims you threatened him, if someone records something the wrong way, then record this," Ridge said, and his words were flat as stone. "We're here to protect a child." That's it. The police didn't like it, but they couldn't deny it. Not fully. Not when they'd seen the ward reports. Not when they knew response time had failed the first time. Not when they could smell desperation on Cole like gasoline. Still, the pressure from above came fast. A hospital administrator rushed out, flanked by another official and a woman with a clipboard who looked like she'd never been within a mile of real danger. "This is unacceptable," the administrator barked, pointing at Ridge like Ridge was the problem. "You are not authorized to be here. You are intimidating our staff and scaring families. You need to leave now." Behind the glass doors, nurses watched with tense faces. Some looked afraid. Some looked relieved. Some looked angry. Not at the bikers, but at the fact that this situation existed at all. Ridge didn't flinch. "Your staff called for help," he said. "Maybe not officially, but they needed it." "We have security," the administrator insisted, voice rising. Gravel shifted his weight slightly, nothing more. That tiny movement said everything. The administrator's bravado faltered for half a second. Then he doubled down, because men like him always did when reality threatened their paperwork. If you don't leave, we will press trespassing charges. Ridge's eyes hardened. Do what you need to do. That's when the media vans arrived. They came hungry, rolling in with cameras and bright lights, painting the scene into something it wasn't. A reporter stepped into frame with breathless urgency, speaking into a microphone like she was announcing the end of the world. Words like gang and takeover floated through the air, twisting the truth into something uglier and easier to sell. Across social media, the story broke in pieces, short clips with no context. Bikers at a children's hospital. Patches. Lines. Police lights. People who had no idea what was happening filling comment sections with assumptions and fear. Inside, the real story stayed quiet. A child in bed. A mother barely holding herself together. A treatment schedule that could not be disrupted again. But the noise outside made it harder, not because Ridge cared about headlines, but because headlines brought pressure. Pressure brought police. Police brought orders. Orders brought the risk of being forced away at the exact moment Cole decided to strike. Fatigue began to show. Riders rotated, but even rotation couldn't erase the cold that seeped into joints and bones. Snow started to fall in thin, sharp flakes, sticking to leather shoulders and melting into dark spots. Fingers went numb. Eyes burned from sleeplessness. The hospital's fluorescent lobby lights made everything feel harsh and unnatural, like a scene that shouldn't exist. Nix moved among the club members, passing out coffee, checking faces, touching arms in quiet reminders to breathe. She watched Ridge closely. She knew the signs of old ghosts when they stirred. Because Ridge had one, it showed in the way he looked at the hospital doors. Not with fear like other people's fear, but with something deeper, something buried. Hospitals weren't just buildings to him. They were memories with teeth. Mace noticed too. He didn't ask directly, but his voice softened when he spoke to Ridge. "You okay?" Ridge's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm fine." Mace didn't push, but the truth hovered anyway, bleeding through the cracks. Ridge hated hospitals more than he hated jail cells. Prisons were predictable. Hospitals were where you watched people you loved slip away while you were powerless to stop it. A rider approached, young, eager, wanting reassurance. "President," he said, "how long are we staying?" Ridge's eyes flicked toward the upper floors where Lily lay. "Until it's done," he answered. The young rider hesitated. "And if they force us out?" Ridge's stare sharpened. "Then we stand outside the property line," he said. "We stand in the cold. We stand wherever we're allowed to stand. But we stand." The words weren't dramatic. They were final. A code, spoken plain. As the night deepened, Cole's patience snapped. He prowled at the edge of the line with his men, voice rising, movements sharper. His allies looked less confident now, glancing at police, glancing at cameras, realizing this wasn't a bar fight. They could end up in cuffs. Cole didn't care. Cole was drowning in obsession. He pointed at Ridge. "You're keeping me from my kid," he screamed. "You're gonna pay for this." Ridge didn't react. That lack of reaction fed Cole's rage like oxygen. Cole moved suddenly, stepping toward the entrance as if he meant to rush it, testing reflexes, testing nerves. Riders shifted controlled, ready, but not escalating. Gravel's stance widened just enough. Mace's hand lifted slightly, a silent signal down the line. Cole halted, breathing hard, eyes wild. He wanted a spark. He wanted someone to hit him so he could scream victim, so he could justify the next step. Ridge gave him nothing. The police sergeant stepped between them, voice harsh. "Back off," he ordered Cole. "Now." Cole spun on him. "You're protecting them," he snapped. "You're protecting criminals over a father." The sergeant's face hardened. "I'm protecting a hospital," he said. "And I'm protecting that kid upstairs from you." Cole stared, stunned, like the world had finally admitted what he refused to see. Then his expression twisted into something more dangerous than anger. Desperation. Because the clock was closing. Everyone knew it now. Lily's critical treatment was scheduled for the next day. A window that could not be missed. One disruption, one forced removal, one ripped line, and the fragile balance could collapse. Cole knew it too, even if he didn't understand medicine. He understood timing. He understood that tomorrow meant more of the hospital claiming his child, more of Hannah reclaiming power, more of him losing what he believed he was entitled to. That night became the point of no return. Snow fell harder. Cameras kept rolling. Police radios crackled with orders. Hospital administrators made calls to lawyers. Riders fought fatigue with coffee and stubbornness. And in a quiet room upstairs, Lily slept beneath warm blankets, unaware that the world below was bracing for the moment a broken man decided to stop asking and start taking. It happened the way the worst things always happened. Quiet first, then sudden, then all at once. The main entrance was still watched, still lined, still lit by the glow of street lamps and the steady blue pulse of cruisers parked near the curb. Cameras were still hungry out front. Cole Ray knew that. He had circled that line for hours, shouting, threatening, testing, failing. Every time he pushed, he met the same thing. Discipline that didn't crack, eyes that didn't flinch, bodies that didn't move aside. So he stopped pushing the front, and he went looking for a softer door. The service corridor sat off to the side of the hospital, half hidden behind delivery bays and dumpsters, a place meant for linens, food carts, and quiet staff movement. It was the kind of route most people didn't notice unless they worked here. Cole noticed it because he had already decided rules didn't apply to him. He noticed it because he was desperate enough to turn a hospital into a maze and hunt through it like a predator. He led his remaining allies toward it under the cover of snowfall and distraction. 2 men followed now, not a dozen. The others had peeled off as fear and consequences finally seeped into their bones. Cole didn't care. He didn't need an army, he needed a gap. A back door stood under a dim security light, painted metal with a keypad lock. Cole tried it anyway. Locked. He muttered something vicious and stepped back, eyes darting. His hands trembled, not from cold but from fury that had nowhere left to go. One of his men, nervous, unsure, said, "Cole, man, this is a hospital." Cole whirled on him like a cornered animal. "Shut up," he snarled. "You don't get it. They're killing her. Hannah's letting them. I'm the only one trying to save her." The man flinched, and for a second it looked like he might walk away. Cole grabbed him by the collar and yanked him close. "You're with me," he hissed, "or you're against me." The man swallowed hard and nodded, not out of loyalty but fear. Cole dug into his pocket and pulled out a small tool, something he brought specifically for this moment. A cheap metal pick. He bent toward the keypad housing like he'd watched someone do it once and thought that made him capable. His finger slipped. He cursed. Snow melted against his knuckles, turning to cold water. Inside, somewhere, a door alarm chirped softly. Just a tiny sound in a sleeping building. But tiny sounds mattered when a ward held children whose bodies couldn't afford surprise. A nurse on night rounds heard it. She paused, head turning, heart tightening. She reached for her radio and whispered, "Possible breach near service corridor. Repeat, possible breach." The message traveled fast. Not through official channels first, but through the human network that had formed under pressure. The nurses who had watched Ridge's people stand for hours, the guards who had seen what real deterrence looked like, the bikers who had been waiting for the moment Cole stopped barking and started biting. Mace heard it and moved before anyone finished speaking. He didn't run. He didn't need to. He signaled with 2 fingers and riders peeled from their posts like shadows slipping into place. Gravel followed, silent, heavy, a walking barrier. Ridge was already in motion. He had been resting in a chair in the lobby with his eyes half closed, not asleep, never fully asleep, when the radio crackled. He rose without a word, spine straightening like a steel rod. Nix caught his arm for a second, her gaze searching his face. "Be careful," she said quietly. Ridge's eyes softened, just enough to show she mattered. "Always," he answered, then turned and walked toward the side exit. The service corridor was narrow, industrial, colder than the rest of the building. The walls were painted a sickly off-white. Pipes ran along the ceiling like exposed veins. It smelled like bleach and storage and old cardboard, the kind of place nobody wanted a confrontation, which made it perfect for one. Cole finally managed to pop part of the casing loose. He yanked at it, breath ragged, eyes wild. The door's alarm chirped louder now, and his men shifted nervously behind him. Then a voice behind him said, calm and absolute. "Step away from that door." Cole froze. He turned slowly, expecting a security guard, expecting someone he could shove aside. Instead, he saw Ridge Calder. Ridge stood at the end of the corridor like the corridor had been built for him, shadowed under dim overhead lights, shoulders broad, face scarred, eyes cold and steady. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't square up like a brawler. He simply occupied the space, unmoving, like a mountain had decided to block the path. Mace appeared to Ridge's left, positioning himself near a side junction. Gravel stepped into place to Ridge's right, sealing off the only other clear exit. Two more riders moved behind Cole without a sound, turning the corridor into a cage. Cole's face twisted in rage. "You again," he spat. "You think you can stop me?" Ridge didn't answer the challenge the way Cole wanted. He didn't feed the drama. He didn't give Cole the spark he was desperate for. He said, "You're done." Cole laughed, frantic. "I'm her father." "You're a threat," Ridge replied. "To her." "To everyone in that ward." Cole stepped forward, chest heaving. "Move," he growled. "Move, or I swear to God." Ridge didn't move. That stillness was the defining action. Not violence, not a punch, not a chokehold, just a man who refused to be pushed aside because a child's life depended on his refusal. Cole's eyes flicked to Gravel, to Mace, to the riders behind him. The realization hit him in pieces. He was trapped. He was outnumbered. His control, the only thing he had ever truly worshipped, was gone. That was when he snapped. He lunged, not at Ridge's face, but at the side, trying to slip past. Gravel moved like a door slamming shut. A single massive arm extended, blocking Cole's path without striking him. Cole crashed into it, stumbling back, cursing. "Touch me," Cole screamed. "Go ahead. Give me what I need. You'll all go down for assault." Mace's voice cut through, sharp and flat. "You want a story. You're not getting one." Cole spun, eyes blazing, and shoved at Mace. Mace didn't hit him. He caught Cole's wrists, twisting just enough to stop movement without breaking anything. Controlled pain. Controlled restraint. Cole howled and thrashed, his voice bouncing off metal doors and concrete walls. The noise traveled upward through vents and halls. Somewhere above, a child woke and began to cry. Somewhere else, a mother sat up in bed with terror in her chest, listening to shouting and thinking it was the beginning of the end. Engines outside idled louder as riders repositioned. The sound was a low growl beneath the building, like restrained beasts holding back. Police radios crackled. Footsteps pounded in distant halls as security and officers were alerted. Cole fought like a man possessed, not strong enough to win, but dangerous enough to cause harm if given a single inch. He spat at Ridge, eyes wild. "You're nothing," he snarled. "You're just criminals with patches." Ridge stepped closer, voice low, words edged with truth. "We're the ones who showed up," he said. "Where were you when she needed peace?" Cole's face contorted. For a fraction of a second, something cracked behind his rage, pain, fear, helplessness. Then it hardened again into denial. He tried to jerk free. Gravel moved in, not striking, but wrapping Cole's torso with a grip that ended the fight in one controlled motion. Cole's arms pinned, his legs kicking uselessly. His breath coming fast and ragged. "No!" Cole screamed. "Let me go! Let me see her!" Ridge leaned in, close enough that Cole could see his eyes clearly. Ridge's voice was quiet, almost gentle, and that gentleness somehow made it worse for Cole. "You don't get to destroy her and call it love," Ridge said. Cole's breathing hitched. His eyes darted toward the door again, the hospital beyond it, the ward upstairs like a prize he couldn't reach. Then the police arrived. Boots thundered down the corridor. Flashlights snapped on, flooding the space with harsh white glare. Officers rushed in, stopping short when they saw the scene. Cole restrained, Ridge standing calm, the bikers holding position without swinging, without stomping, without the violence everyone expected. The sergeant stared, disbelief flickering across his face. "What happened?" Ridge released a slow breath. "He tried to breach a service entrance," Ridge said. "We stopped him. No one hit him." The sergeant looked at Cole, who was still shouting, still thrashing. Then he looked at Ridge, at Mace, at Gravel, at the calm discipline in their posture. He swallowed and nodded once. "Cuff him," he ordered his officers. Cole fought the cuffs, screaming about rights and conspiracies, but the officers hauled him away. No blood on the floor. No broken bones. No revenge. Just consequences arriving at last. As Cole was dragged past Ridge, his eyes locked onto Ridge's face, hatred and humiliation twisting together. Ridge didn't speak. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. His presence was the message. When the corridor finally quieted, the change in the air was almost physical. Power shifted. The fear that had been choking the ward loosened, not because danger vanished, but because everyone finally understood who had truly stood for the innocent. Upstairs, nurses exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for days. Parents held their children closer and whispered, "It's okay. It's okay." And Lily, still sleeping beneath her blankets, remained exactly where she needed to be, alive, protected, and one night closer to the treatment that might save her. The aftermath did not arrive with cheers or celebration. It arrived quietly, the way real endings often did, heavy with exhaustion and relief tangled together. Cole Ray was led out through the service corridor in handcuffs, his shouting fading into the night as police doors slammed shut. This time, there was no return. Statements were taken. Reports were written. Witnesses were plentiful. The charges did not dissolve in technicalities or delays. They stuck, anchored by evidence, by recordings, by the undeniable truth of what he had tried to do. For the first time since he had stormed into the ward, Cole's power evaporated completely, replaced by consequences he could not shout his way out of. Inside the hospital, the shift was almost immediate. The alarms were silenced. The corridors settled back into their familiar hush. Nurses moved more slowly now, shoulders still tense but no longer braced for impact. Some leaned against walls for a moment longer than usual, eyes closed, letting the adrenaline drain. Others wiped at their faces and pretended it was just fatigue. A few didn't pretend at all. They approached the bikers quietly, one by one, offering nods, murmured thank yous, hands pressed briefly against leather-clad arms in gestures that carried more weight than words ever could. Hannah stood beside Lily's bed when the news reached her. She didn't cry at first. She just stood there, holding her daughter's hand, listening as a nurse explained that Cole was in custody and would not be returning. The words took time to sink in. Safety, after so long without it, felt unreal. When it finally did settle into her chest, Hannah's knees buckled slightly, and she had to sit down before her strength gave out entirely. Tears came then, silent and shaking, not from fear this time, but from the release of it. Lily never missed her treatment. The schedule held. The lines stayed in place. The medication flowed the way it was meant to. Doctors moved forward without interruption, without raised voices in the hallway, without having to glance over their shoulders. Each hour that passed felt like a small victory stitched together into something larger. Lily's body, fragile but stubborn, responded the way the doctors had hoped it would. Numbers shifted. Markers improved. The fight continued, but now it was the right kind of fight, the one that happened inside her body instead of around her bed. The iron serpents did not leave immediately. Ridge would not allow it. He knew better than to confuse an arrest with an ending. Men like Cole had a way of trying again if given space. So the line remained, though it softened. Riders rotated in quieter shifts. Engines were shut down more often than not. Some bikers moved farther back from the entrance to make the space feel less intimidating, responding to the hospital's needs without being asked. They stayed because staying was the promise, and promises mattered. Slowly, the hospital breathed again. Parents stopped flinching at every raised voice. Children slept deeper, their rest no longer broken by shouting or alarms that didn't belong to machines. Staff laughed softly at the nurse's station for the first time in days, the sound tentative at first, then stronger, like a muscle being used again after injury. Order returned, not because the danger had never existed, but because it had been faced and held. Hannah found Ridge in the lobby late one night, standing near the glass doors, watching snow drift down under the streetlights. She hesitated, unsure how to begin, then simply spoke the truth. "You saved her life," she said quietly. Ridge didn't turn right away. When he did, his expression was steady, but something tired lived beneath it. "We kept the door closed," he replied. The doctors did the rest. Hannah shook her head. You showed up, she said. When no one else could. Ridge nodded once, accepting the words without pride, without deflection. That was his way. Hannah thanked Nix next, then Mace, then Gravel, her gratitude moving through the line like a current. None of them asked for recognition. None of them lingered on it. They had done what the code demanded. That was enough. When the time finally came to leave, it was done quietly. No grand exit. No revving engines for attention. Riders mounted up in small groups and rolled away into the night, their presence dissolving back into the city they had come from. Ridge stayed until the last possible moment, eyes lifting once more toward the upper floors where Lily slept. He left different than he had arrived. The hospital had stirred memories he usually kept locked down, reminders of why the code existed in the first place. It was not about patches or reputation or standing tall against the world. It was about moments like this, standing between harm and someone who could not stand for themselves. It was about restraint when violence would have been easier, about presence when fear tried to claim the ground. As Ridge rode away, the cold air biting against his face, he carried that reminder with him, not as a burden, but as an anchor. The code had been tested and proven again, not in a bar fight or a backroad showdown, but in a children's hospital that had needed guardians more than warriors. And for everyone who had been there, the truth settled into place with quiet certainty. Sometimes order was restored not by force, but by those willing to stand still and refuse to move. The lesson left behind was not loud, and it was not comfortable, but it was unmistakable. Good men were not defined by how they looked, the clothes they wore, or the labels society stamped on them from a distance. They were defined by who they chose to protect when it mattered most, especially when there was nothing to gain and everything to lose. In a world obsessed with appearances and assumptions, the truth revealed itself in action, not image. Brotherhood proved itself stronger than reputation. The Iron Serpents did not stand for praise or recognition. They stood because a line had to be held, and because walking away would have meant living with something they could not outrun. Honor showed its real shape in restraint, in choosing not to strike when violence would have been easier and more satisfying. Compassion did not weaken them, it sharpened their purpose and gave their strength meaning. The story exposed how easily fear lies to people. Monsters are often imagined where none exist, while real danger hides behind familiar faces and justified words. In the end, the Guardians did not look like heroes from a distance. They wore leather. They carried scars. They were misunderstood. And yet, when innocence needed protection and the system could not move fast enough, they were the ones who showed up, stood their ground, and stayed until the danger passed. Courage doesn't always come wrapped in uniforms or stamped with approval. Sometimes it rides in on two wheels, wearing leather, carrying scars, and asking for nothing in return. Stories like this remind us that loyalty still exists, that brotherhood is more than a word, and that the people you least expect can become the ones who stand tallest when it counts. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes honor matters. And tell us this. When everything was on the line, would you have stood that line too? Let us know in the comments.